Welcome back. Today we're just going to do basic oil change. This is a 2003 Chevy Impala behind me. We're going to go through just basic what you need to do, a couple things to look for when you're doing an oil change, and at the same time when I do this oil change I use synthetic, so I change about every 8,000 miles, and I rotate the tires. You should rotate your tires every 6,000 to 8,000 miles, so whenever I do an oil change I do a rotation of tires, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. Okay, I'm just going to go through a few things that you should be aware of when you're doing an oil change. I use synthetic, as I said before. This filter is made for synthetic oil. It has more capacity and it can handle extended interval. If you're going to use synthetic oil, buy a good filter. Buy a filter that's made for synthetic. You do not want to use a regular filter and run it for extended intervals of 6,000 to 8,000 miles, because the filters are not made to handle that. So make sure you use a good filter that's made for synthetic oil. This is a Purolator's PSL series made specifically for that. Another thing I wanted to point out, if you look right here on this bottom of this filter, there's a black gasket. We're going to lightly lubricate that with oil before we put it on, before we put this new filter on. When you take the old filter off, make sure the gasket that's on the old filter comes off with the filter. It doesn't stick to the side of the engine. If you don't do that and it's on there and you put a new filter on top of it, it will leak really bad. So make sure you do that. The other thing, I can't do it on this car, but some cars the oil filter faces up or slightly angled. You can pre-fill this filter before you put it on. If you can do that, based on the position of the filter on your car, you should pre-fill this filter. Just pour it right down the middle. It'll settle a little bit. Do it a couple times and fill it up as much as you can. All that'll do is when the engine starts up, instead of having to fill this filter before it pumps it to the top half of the motor, it'll immediately start pumping to the top half of the motor. That'll just reduce your wear a little bit. So if you can do that, do that. I have some cardboard down in case it spills a little bit so it doesn't get on the floor. But I have the drain pan here, and we're underneath the engine, underneath the car, and in the back here is the drain plug. So we're going to loosen that drain plug. Take that drain plug out. Hopefully not like that. Loose the wrench. We'll just loosen it up, get it loose here, get it started, and undo it. Let it drain out. I have gloves on, one because I don't want oil all over my hands, but two because this car's hot still. Just finished running it a couple minutes ago, so it's pretty hot. I don't want to get burned by the oil. So we'll just let that drain. It'll take a couple minutes. While that drains, we'll talk a little bit about the oil filter. So the oil filter on this car is in the front on an angle, so we have to reach up in there and undo that oil filter before we can, obviously before we can put the new one on there. Sometimes you can just reach up with your hand and get these loose by hand. And this one's pretty loose, so I can just spin it by hand without having to use a wrench to get it loose. And as you can see, it's starting to drain. The oil's definitely hot. Feel through the glove. So as I mentioned a little earlier, I'm going to check this to make sure that the gasket, which it is, it came off with the filter. We want to make sure that comes off with the old filter. Okay, so I've got the new filter and I've lubricated that gasket on there. A little bit of oil. Just a little bit of oil, and I'm going to reach up and put the new filter on. One thing I will say, when you're putting a new filter on, you do not use a wrench. You should not use a wrench when putting a new filter on. Just hand tight. It does not need a wrench. I'm just going to spin this filter on by hand. Should spin on pretty easy. Make sure you don't cross thread it. The general rule of thumb for this is spin it down until it meets, the gasket meets the side of the engine block, and then 3/4 of a turn more to seal it. No wrench, as I mentioned before, just by hand. Don't need to put a wrench on it. Okay. It's pretty much drained. A little bit still come out of the drain plug, but not much. I'm going to put that drain plug back in there. make sure, I'll show you this. I'll show it to you. There is a gasket in this car, right, built in to the drain plug, a little grommet kind of. It's built in. Some cars have a crush washer, Toyotas, Hondas, some other makes. You have to replace it every time. This one, you don't. You're just going to make sure that it's not cracked or leak, so it won't leak. And then insert it back in, and we're going to tighten it back up. So when you tighten these drain plugs up, like I said, Toyotas, Hondas, things like that, they have specific torque they want you to torque them to. These, I'm sure they have a torque as well, but you don't need to crush them. You just need to snug them up so they'll seal. So I'm not going to do it really, really tight. I'm just going to snug it up pretty good. And that's it. Ready to go. That's it. You want to check it when you're done anyway. Run it for a few minutes. Check it. Make sure it's not leaking when you're finished. Okay, so I'm just going to clean this up. It's a little messy from the oil. The filter drains down the side of the panel. I'm just going to spray this down with a little brake clean. Clean it up a little bit. Let it drain into the pan. Like to be clean about it. Don't need to leave a mess. So we'll just leave that, let it drain to the pan there, drip down in the pan, and we're done. Pretty much. We put the new filter on, made sure the old gasket came off with the old filter, drained it, put the drain plug back in, snug the drain plug back up, and now we're going to go up top and actually put the oil in. Now we're going to actually add oil to the engine. Find out what type of oil you take. You do a couple things. A lot of times right on the oil filler cap, and in this case you can see right there 530, so that's the weight of the oil that we need to use in this. If it doesn't say in your cap, look in your owner's manual. It'll tell you what you should use what it recommends. And then for capacity or how much the engine will take, look in your owner's manual. This car takes 4.5 quarts, or if you're going to the auto parts store to buy it, they can tell you how much it takes as well. And then we're going to fill it up basically right through the oil filler cap, which I just took off. Okay, so we've added 4.5 quarts. Make sure you put the oil cap back on there. Tighten that up. That's pretty much it for an oil change. Pretty simple to do. You know, regular maintenance on your car goes a long way in making your car last a lot longer. Whether you're going to do it yourself or whether you're going to have somebody do it, just do your regular maintenance. Your oil changes, rotate your tires, you know, check your antifreeze, check your fluid levels, you know, your power steering, brake levels, things like that, or have somebody do it, and your car will last a lot longer if you do the regular maintenance and take care of it. That's it. We're gonna talk. I'm gonna talk a little bit about tire rotation. I mentioned a little earlier when I do change oil, I also rotate my tires because I change oil every 1,000 miles or so. Look in your owner's manual. A lot of times it'll tell you a pattern for rotating tires. These I rotate the front to the back on the same side, and I take the back off of this side and it goes to the front on the opposite side. That's just a pattern that's used. If you do this when you do your oil changes every 6,000 to 8,000 miles or every 2 oil changes, depending on how often you change, your tires will last a lot longer. They'll wear a lot more evenly. Car will ride a lot better. So this is a good time if you're doing a tire rotation to also take a look at your brakes, take a look at your suspension real quick. Just see if anything looks wrong. You can tell if your pads, you know, check your pads, see if anything needs to be changed, see if anything's not wearing correctly. If you have any greasable fittings in your suspension, it's a good time. You have everything apart, wheels out of the way, grease them up as well. As I mentioned before, it's a good time to check your brakes, make sure that you have, you're not due for brakes, everything's wearing well, these look real good. Anything that's greasable, and if you come over here, shine down there, right, oh my grease is leaking out all over the place. Right here, to reach in the back there, tie rod end, this car is greasable. Got a Zerk fitting on it, so we're going to grease that. Got the tire off of there, a lot easier to get to. I'm leaking my grease all over here. It's not real nice, but here you go, you can hold that. We're just going to grease this fitting Gonna get the light over top of there so you can get a good look at it. There you go. Clip it onto that fitting and put some grease in it. There it goes, coming out, pushing the old bad stuff out, good stuff in. Make sure you clean the grease off it when you're done. All it does is attract dirt. One of the other checks you can do, you have the tires up in the air. You can wiggle the tire front to back, top to bottom. Feel this would be ball joint, generally speaking, top to bottom. If it's clicking, moving a lot, this is tight. Same would be tie rod end or possibly wheel bearing. But this is actually moving the whole steering. It's not loose, it's not clicking, it's not worn out. You just check that. That's an easy check to do while you have the tire off the ground. Good thing to do when you rotate your tires. That way you'll know if you start to have something such as ball joint or tie rod end or wheel bearing starting to go. A lot of times you can feel it. And these feel good, so it's another check you can do. So a couple things. We just did an oil change, tire rotation. I have this car up on jack stands. I jacked it up with a floor jack. Don't get under a car with just a floor jack. Make sure you put stands under the car if you're going to be under the car. Just using a floor jack and getting under the car is not safe. So I have actually 4 stands under this car, 2 in the front, 2 in the back. All the wheels are off the ground. Makes it a little easier to do. Obviously easier to do the tire rotation, and since I'm doing that in the oil change, I just put all 4 of them under. One other thing, and I forget this stuff sometimes because you just do it, you don't think about it, you've done it enough. When you're tightening the wheel, you always want to go in a star pattern. So you don't want to go around and tighten them like this. You want to go across, always across. So I start with this one, I go across to that. I go back across, back across, back across. And I might do it again just to make sure they're tight. I tighten these with a gun, but it doesn't matter. I didn't tighten them real tight with a gun. I'm going to put this car back on the ground, and I'm going to go around by hand and torque these and make sure they're torqued correctly. Same thing, always in a star pattern. Just always across from each other when you're doing them. I don't think about that, and once you do it a couple times you really don't, but I wanted to mention that just in case you didn't know. You do not want to go around like this. You want to go back and forth when you're tightening. That's pretty much it. Tire rotation is the easy thing to do. If you do it yourself or have somebody do it. A lot of automotive service places, if you buy the tires there, they will rotate them for you for free. So I highly recommend if you did that every 6,000 to 8,000 miles, take them in, get them rotated, let them rotate them for you. That's pretty much it. Basic stuff. If you want to try something, you don't do a lot of work on your car, this is a pretty easy thing to do.